Welcome to the PLMA Live monthly interview. I'm your host, Tim Simmons. Today, I'm talking with Carmine Gallo, author of a new book, The Apple Experience: Secrets of Building Insanely Great Customer Loyalty. This follows another book of his, The Innovation Secrets of Steve Jobs. Carmine is also a contributor for Forbes.com and heads his own company, Gallo Communications. Carmine, welcome to PLMA Live. Much of your book focuses on Steve Jobs and the Apple stores. You write that the Apple stores have become one of the world's most profitable retailers. Is that really true?
The Apple Store is the most profitable retailer in America. There are about 380 locations around the world, 40,000 employees, but here's some interesting numbers, very impressive numbers. 20,000 people per week visit the average Apple store. $5,600 per annual sales in square footage. So the second place retailer is Tiffany. This wasn't supposed to happen. That's what really intrigued me about the whole Apple Store history and experience. It wasn't supposed to happen. In 2001, when Steve Jobs and a fellow named Ron Johnson, who's now the CEO of JCPenney, came up with the concept of the Apple Store, a lot of people didn't give them a chance. One retail analyst famously predicted that Apple would turn off the lights on its experiment within 2 years.
Can you put your finger on one or two of the key factors that led to its success?
Well, here's what was a revelation to me. A lot of people look at the Apple stores, and I'm sure you've seen them. They're just beautiful, iconic structures. Steve Jobs did teach us that a physical location could be more than just four walls to contain products. They could actually be architectural landmarks that took your breath away. So a lot of people look at the outside of the Apple Store, and they look at the beautiful patented glass staircase or the windows and the products, which of course are excellent products. But what I learned is the secret sauce is the people. The people that they hire, how they are hired, trained, motivated, and taught to communicate to us, the customer. Nothing is taken for granted, and it starts with a hiring process. So if there's one element or ingredient in the secret sauce, it's the hiring process. Not too different than from what Wegmans does, what Trader Joe's does. Wegmans, for example, likes to hire people who have two things, a passion for food and a commitment to customer service. Apple Store looks for much of the same thing, a passion for products and a commitment to customer service. Apple likes to say they hire for smiles. So they look for people who have engaging, winning personalities. In fact, they would rather find someone who has passion and personality than proficiency and know-how, which is interesting. One manager told me, Carmine, we can teach someone how to sell an iPad. We can't teach friendly.
So you're saying these principles can be applied to less exotic, more mundane industries?
For leaders in more mundane industries, unfortunately, that's the way they see it. They see it as a mundane industry. We're just here to move goods, when really it could be so much more than that, especially when it comes to the customer experience. I think the gold mine that applies to any retailer, any service environment where there is an employee interacting with a customer is called the 5 steps of service. And I learned this from Apple. They actually have 5 steps that they teach every employee to walk through when they're interacting with a customer. It is the gold mine, Tim, because as soon as I started writing about it, I got emails, a lot of emails from companies around the world applying the 5 steps to their own brand, their business, in all sorts of different industries, not just retailing. Quickly, the 5 steps are, if you think of Apple as an acronym, APPLE. Approach customers with a personalized, warm welcome. Probe politely to understand the customer's needs. That means asking them closed and open-ended questions. Presenting a solution for the customer to take home today. Listen for and resolve issues or concerns, and end with a fond farewell and an invitation to return. That's actually a conversation that can be 2 minutes or 30 minutes, but it's a conversation that happens between an employee or a salesperson and a customer. If you walk someone through the 5 steps, they're going to have a much richer and more memorable experience with the salesperson.
Speaking of salespeople, one of the people I liked best in your book was someone called Carla, a woman with purple hair and tattoos. You said she represents the next generation of customer service.
Yeah, that's right. She has purple hair, and Apple hires for diversity as well. So it's okay if you have purple hair or if you have, piercings or nose rings or tattoos, because they're looking for personalities. They're looking for winning personalities. Carla also is very important to me because she used a very important term, empower. I am empowered to do what is right for the customer. That too is the gold mine. That's part of the secret sauce. It's consistent with what Wegmans does. Managers are empowered to do what they believe is right without getting multiple layers of approval. It's what Ritz-Carlton does. They empower employees to do what's right, and it's what the Apple Store does as well. So when she used the word empowerment, that's very strong, which means that she can spend 1 hour with me. Carla spent 1 hour with me, and I asked her, well, are you going to get in trouble for that? She said, no. I'm empowered to do what I think is right for the customer. As long as you have a good experience. Did you have a good experience, Carmine? I said, yeah, I had a great experience. She goes, that's what's important. So she's empowered to do what is right for the customer. What a concept.
After reading your book, Carmine, I get the sense that what's happening at Apple is part of a larger trend, both in retailing and in business generally.
I've actually spoken to a number of contractors and people who work to build new retail establishments, and they've told me that every one of their clients, almost every single one, asks them, what can we do to be more Apple-like? I mean, Apple has had this extraordinary influence across a lot of stores, companies, retailers. I can name very specific brands that were directly inspired by the Apple Store. They are Disney. The Disney stores are completely reimagined and completely revitalized because of direct conversations with Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs actually gave Disney advice on what to do with the stores. And what they did, Tim, is make the stores more multidimensional. So in other words, when you walk into a Disney store now, at least a revitalized Disney store, it's not just about buying products. It's interacting with the products in totally new ways. So they have theater and they have classes, just like the Apple Store has classes on how to work with your Mac, how to get more out of your computer. Walk into a Lego store. A Lego store is often right next to or across the mall from an Apple Store. They benchmark their experience against the Apple Store. They too have started classes and workshops so that people get the kids get more engaged with the products. Apple did that in 2001. So a lot of stores and brands are benchmarking against Apple.
In your book, you quote Thomas Friedman, a newspaper columnist, who wrote, "Average is officially over." What did he mean by that?
I love that quote by Thomas Friedman when he said, average is over. Because if you just do things the average way, it generates below average results. In this incredibly global competitive environment that your merchants obviously are working in and all of us are working in now, we have to step up our game. And we need to be consistent with quality and with service. And what we did learn from Steve Jobs was, insane about details. And he wanted to make sure what he called the aesthetic was followed all the way through. So he looked at his presentations. Are they as beautiful as they could be? Are they as minimalist as they could be? Do we communicate the information in the best way we can? How about the website? Is that also consistent with my presentations? Is the Apple website minimal and consistent and beautiful and elegant? Is it the best we can be? When he would walk into an Apple store, he didn't like to see fingerprints on handrails or fingerprints on the devices. He wanted to make sure they were all wiped down. All the computers in an angle are set at an angle, at exactly the same angle, so that it looks better. It's more of an aesthetic. Steve Jobs was he was obsessed with detail and with design. But he said the aesthetic has to be carried all the way through. And that's the way I interpret Thomas Friedman's quote, okay? Because too many of us are average. Oh, it's okay. It'll get by. Instead, we have to look at every touch point, certainly every touch point with the customer. Everywhere where we interact with the customer, the sales and the customer, on the phone, on the internet, on our social media, and in person at the retail store. Is it as great as that can be? And if it's not as great as it can be, who can we learn from?
And finally, the big question that's on everybody's mind. Will the success of Apple stores continue after Steve Jobs' death?
What I've heard over the last few weeks at Apple is that they are committed to the customer experience. And so they want to continue to strive to always improve the experience, which is interesting because it's hard. Everybody else now is benchmarking it against Apple. The customer experience overall in all of our industries is rising. So how do you keep one step ahead? Feedback. They're getting feedback from customers every single day, and they're inputting that data. So they don't just sell you something and you're gone. They send you an email afterwards. As soon as you get back to your desk, you've got an email. On a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend Apple to a friend? And if you put 2 or 3, sometimes they'll call you. They'll give you a call. Well, why? What happened? What can we do to make a better experience for you?
Carmine, thanks for taking us inside the world of Steve Jobs and the Apple Store experience. Well, the surprising success of the Apple stores demonstrates clearly that the world of retailing and customer service is undergoing some extraordinary changes, and these shifts are bound to have a big impact on all of us. Thanks for watching this edition of PLMA Live, and join us next month for another exclusive interview.